The session began with Jake sitting stiffly in the chair opposite me, his hands gripping the edge of his knees. His voice broke the silence, quiet but heavy with an urgency that filled the room. "I thought we had the perfect marriage," he began. 20 years, 2 kids, no major fights, just the usual stuff. "But now I think I've been blind this whole time. Sarah doesn't love me. Maybe she never did." He glanced up, his expression a mix of frustration and something deeper, more fragile. "I don't even know when I started seeing it. Maybe it was when our son left for college and the house got quieter. I started reading these books about relationships, at first just to kill time, you know. But the more I read, the more I started noticing things about us. Like how Sarah never really initiates anything, whether it's a hug, a kiss, or more. I thought she was just tired or distracted. Now I think she's just indifferent." I stayed silent, letting him unpack his thoughts at his own pace. "She says she's happy. But it's like she's saying it to convince herself. I've been thinking back over the years, and it feels like she's been going through the motions. She takes care of the house, the kids, me, but there's no joy in it. It's like she's stuck." He paused, searching my face for a reaction, then looked away, his voice dropping. "And maybe I'm the one who trapped her. I thought I was being a good husband, making the money, keeping the family secure. But I controlled everything. She's never even had to pay a bill or make a big decision because I did it all. I thought I was helping her, but now I wonder if I just made her dependent. Like she's with me because she has no other choice." The room felt charged with his words, his raw self-awareness laying bare years of unspoken truths. "Last month, I told her I wanted us to work on this. I admitted I'd been controlling, that I hadn't paid enough attention to what she needed, and I asked if we could try to fix things. You know what she said? She looked at me and said, 'I'm fine. I don't need anything to change. If you're unhappy, you can leave.' Just like that." His jaw tightened, and he leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests now. I couldn't believe it. I mean, 20 years, 2 kids, and that's all she has to say. I tried again, a week later, and it ended the same way. She cried, told me everything was fine, but it's not fine. She's not fine. And I don't know how to make her see that." The weight of his confession lingered, and I let the silence stretch between us before finally speaking. "Jake, what you're describing is deeply painful, but it's also a pivotal moment. You're seeing your relationship through a new lens, and that clarity can feel overwhelming. But the fact that you're here, seeking answers, shows your commitment to understanding and change." He nodded, but his face stayed tense. "I just don't know if she wants the same thing. Every time I bring it up, it's like I'm hitting a wall. She shuts down, and then I feel guilty, like I'm pushing her too hard. But if I stop trying, nothing will change, and I can't live like this anymore." His voice cracked, and he quickly looked away, blinking hard. "Jake, have you ever shared these feelings with Sarah in a way that focuses on what you're feeling rather than what you think she's doing wrong?" "I've tried," he said quickly. "I told her I feel disconnected, that I miss her, that I want us to feel closer again. But it's like she doesn't want to hear it. She says, 'Everything's fine, Jake. Stop overthinking.' How am I supposed to fix this if she won't even admit there's a problem?" I leaned forward slightly, my tone soft but firm. "Sometimes, when people resist engaging in these conversations, it's not because they don't care, but because they're scared. Change is uncomfortable, and facing the possibility that something isn't perfect can feel overwhelming, especially if they've relied on that stability for a sense of security. Sarah might be avoiding these talks because they threaten her idea of what your marriage is. But that doesn't mean the conversation isn't worth pursuing, only that it needs to be approached differently." Jake exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping. "I just don't know how to reach her. I don't even know if she wants me to." We sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of his uncertainty settling between us. Then I said, Jake, your desire to fix this is a powerful starting point. But for any progress, Sarah needs to feel safe enough to explore her own feelings without fear of judgment or pressure. That might take time, and patience. He looked at me, his eyes clouded with doubt, but he nodded. If you've ever felt stuck in a relationship, like Jake, or struggled to connect with a partner who seems emotionally distant, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What helped you navigate those challenges? Or, if you're still in the thick of it, what questions do you have? Let's start a conversation in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone else find clarity. Jake's shoulders were less tense when he walked into the next session, but the heaviness in his eyes remained. He sat down, rubbed his palms together, and looked at me, his gaze searching. I've been thinking about what you said last time, about making Sarah feel safe, he began. I've been going over our conversations in my head, trying to figure out if I've ever really done that. And I don't think I have. He leaned back in his chair, his voice quieter now. I've always been the one in charge. I made the decisions, took care of the big stuff. I thought I was protecting her, but maybe I was just making her feel like she didn't have a choice. When we first got married, she'd tell me what she wanted to do, go back to school, start a business. But I always found a reason why it wasn't the right time. Money, the kids, stability. I thought I was being practical. But now I wonder if I was just controlling everything because it was easier for me. Jake paused, his hands clasped tightly together. I don't think I ever asked her what she needed. Not really. And even now, I keep trying to fix things on my terms. What if she's been waiting for me to just stop trying to fix her and actually listen? I let his words hang in the air for a moment, giving him the space to sit with the weight of his realization. When I told her I wanted us to work on the marriage, I didn't ask her how she felt. I just assumed she'd want the same thing. But what if she doesn't? What if she's okay with the way things are because she doesn't expect anything better from me? Or from herself? He shifted uncomfortably, his voice tinged with frustration. That's the part one can't wrap my head around. Why wouldn't she want better? Why wouldn't she want more? I thought I was doing the right thing, but maybe I've spent 2 decades convincing her that this safe, predictable life, is all there is. I leaned forward slightly, my tone steady. Jake, it sounds like you're starting to see the unspoken patterns in your relationship, and that's a difficult but important step. Sometimes, when people settle into roles for so long, it becomes almost impossible to imagine a different dynamic. Sarah may not be rejecting the idea of change out of indifference, but because she's afraid of what that change might mean. It could feel like too much risk, especially if she's grown to believe this version of your marriage is the best she can hope for. Jake nodded slowly, his expression conflicted. She doesn't like risk, he said, almost to himself. She's always been like that. Even when we were younger, she'd stick to what felt safe. But it wasn't always like this. I remember when we first met, she was bold. She'd talk about the places she wanted to go, the things she wanted to do. Somewhere along the way, that part of her disappeared. He stopped, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was replaying old memories. Maybe I'm the one who snuffed that out. Maybe I've been so focused on making life stable that I forgot to make it alive. The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of his admission settling in. Then he straightened in his chair, his jaw set. I need to change the way I approach this. I need to make it clear to her that I don't want her to change who she is, I just want us to reconnect. I want her to feel like she can be honest with me, even if it's hard. But how do I do that without making her feel like I'm pushing her into a corner again? His question was raw, filled with the vulnerability of someone who was willing to try but unsure how to start. Jake, the first step is to create an environment where Sarah feels she can express herself without fear of judgment or pressure. That means letting go of the outcome for now. Instead of focusing on fixing things, focus on understanding. Approach her with curiosity, not solutions. Let her know you're here to listen, not to change her mind or make her agree with you. He nodded, absorbing the suggestion like a lifeline. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. I hope it's not too late. His voice trailed off, and for the first time, he looked genuinely uncertain. I could see the weight of years pressing down on him, the fear that the foundation he thought was solid might have been cracking all along. If you've ever found yourself wondering how to rebuild a connection with someone you love, what worked for you? Or maybe you're still trying to figure it out. Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else take that first step toward healing. Jake sat across from me again, but something was different this time. His posture was more relaxed, though his face still carried the weight of uncertainty. He took a deep breath before starting, as if gathering courage for what he was about to share. I talked to Sarah last night. Really talked. I didn't go in with a plan or a list of things I wanted to say. I just told her what I've been feeling. That I miss her. That I'm scared for us. And then I stopped talking and just waited. He paused, his hands resting in his lap as he looked down. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me like I'd said something in another language. I could tell she was uncomfortable, but I stayed quiet and let her sit with it. Finally, she said, "Jake, I don't know what you want from me." And that's when it hit me. She really doesn't know. She's so used to me taking charge, fixing everything, that she doesn't know how to handle this version of me, the one who doesn't have all the answers. His voice softened as he continued. I told her I didn't want anything from her except honesty. I told her I just wanted to understand how she feels about us, about me, even if it's hard to hear. She got really quiet, and for a second, I thought she was going to shut down again. But then she said something I'll never forget. He looked up at me, his expression a mixture of sadness and hope. She said, "Jake, I don't know who I am without you." That was it. Just those words. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she's been pulling away, avoiding the hard conversations, it's not that she doesn't care. It's that she's scared. She's built her whole life around me, around our family, and now I'm asking her to look at herself in a way she's never had to before. She's afraid of what she might find. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. I didn't know what to say to her. How do you even begin to respond to something like that? So I just told her the truth. I told her I didn't want her to feel like her whole identity was tied to me. I told her I wanted her to have the freedom to figure out who she is and what she wants, even if that's scary for both of us. And you know what she said? His lips curved into a faint, almost incredulous smile. She said, "What if I don't like what I find?" That broke me. I didn't know how much she'd been carrying all these years, and I never bothered to ask. All I could do was tell her that I'd be there with her, no matter what she finds. That I wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in a long time, she actually believed me. The room felt lighter, as though Jake's breakthrough had lifted some of the tension that had weighed him down for so long. It's not fixed, he said, his tone more grounded now. I know it's going to take time, and she might never fully open up. But for the first time, I feel like we're finally looking in the same direction. And that's a start. As I listened, I thought about the courage it took for Jake to shift from seeking solutions to simply offering understanding. It's a hard thing to do, especially when you're used to taking control. But relationships are rarely about control, they're about connection, and that's what Jake was beginning to rebuild. If you've ever had a moment where everything seemed to click in your relationship, like Jake and Sarah, I'd love to hear about it. What changed for you? Or, if you're still working through those challenges, what do you think is holding you back? Drop a comment below, I'd love to keep the conversation going. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Jake walked into my office with a mixture of determination and exhaustion, the kind of expression you see on someone who has spent hours trying to piece together a puzzle only to find there are still a few pieces missing. He sat down, leaned forward, and clasped his hands together tightly. "I've been thinking a lot about that conversation with Sarah," he began. "It felt like a breakthrough at first, but now, I don't know. It's like we're stuck again. She's still so hesitant to talk, to really dig into anything. I don't want to push her, but I'm scared that if I don't, we'll just fall back into the same old routine, pretending everything's fine when it's not." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I know she's scared. I get that now. But I'm scared too. Scared that I've already done too much damage, that maybe she's too comfortable with the way things are to want anything different. And honestly, part of me wonders if I'm asking for too much. What if this is just who we are? What if we're not capable of more?" The room was quiet for a moment, his questions hanging in the air like smoke. I leaned in, choosing my words carefully. "Jake, it's normal to feel this way when you're navigating such a big shift in your relationship. Change is hard for both people, especially when it involves facing fears that have been buried for years. But remember, progress isn't always a straight line. It's okay to feel stuck sometimes, it doesn't mean you're failing." He nodded slowly, but his gaze was distant. "I keep replaying that moment when she said she doesn't know who she is without me. It's like it's stuck in my head. I want to help her figure it out, but I don't know how to do that without making her feel like it's another thing I'm trying to control. I don't want to be the one guiding her through it, I want her to find it for herself. But then what's my role in all this? Am I just supposed to stand back and wait?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the vulnerability he was trying to hold back. "I feel so helpless. I've spent 20 years building this life for us, and now I don't even know if I'm part of the solution or part of the problem." I could see how deeply he was struggling, caught between his desire to fix things and his realization that this wasn't something he could control. "Jake, your role right now is to be her partner, not her guide. That means showing her through your actions that it's okay for her to take the lead, to explore her own feelings at her own pace. It might feel like you're doing nothing, but sometimes holding space for someone is the most powerful thing you can do. It's not about fixing, it's about being there, consistently, without judgment or expectation." His brow furrowed as he absorbed my words, his hands gripping the edge of the chair. "I hear you. I really do. But it's so hard not to fall back into old habits. Every time she seems distant or withdrawn, I start overthinking, wondering if I'm saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. It's exhausting." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And I keep asking myself, what if it's too late? What if she doesn't want to rebuild this? What if she's just waiting for me to give up so she doesn't have to be the one to walk away?" The weight of his fears was palpable, and I knew they were questions he might not get answers to for a long time. "Jake, those are valid fears, but they're just that, fears. They're not facts. Right now, you're in uncharted territory, and it's natural for your mind to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. But every time you choose to stay present, to show her that you're committed to this process without demanding anything in return, you're proving to her, and to yourself, that there's still hope." He let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his emotions. "I want to believe that," he said quietly. "I really do. And I'm trying to hold on to that hope. I just wish I knew how long it's going to take." There was a pause, and then he looked at me, his expression more determined now. "I guess I just have to keep showing up, don't I? Even when it's hard. Even when it feels impossible. Because if I don't, then I've already lost." His words hung in the air, heavy with both resignation and resolve. I nodded, giving him the silent affirmation he needed. If you've ever felt like you were walking a tightrope in a relationship, unsure of what the next step should be, you're not alone. What helped you stay grounded? Or are you still figuring it out? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your story. Sometimes, sharing our experiences can help others see their own struggles in a new light. The following week, Jake walked in with a different energy. It wasn't exactly light-hearted, but there was a noticeable calm about him, a steadiness in the way he carried himself. He settled into the chair, folding his hands in his lap, and took a long, measured breath before speaking. "Something shifted this week," he began. Not in a big, dramatic way, but in a way that felt real. Sarah and I were sitting in the living room. She was on her laptop, probably looking at recipes or something, and I was reading. It was quiet, comfortable, but I could still feel that distance between us, like a wall we both knew was there but weren't acknowledging. And then I just put the book down and asked her if she wanted to go for a walk. He glanced at me, as if trying to gauge whether this small gesture carried the weight he believed it did. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. I guess I don't ask her to do simple things like that very often. But she nodded, and we went. No agenda, no heavy conversations, just a walk around the neighborhood. And you know what? For the first time in what feels like forever, it felt easy. We didn't talk about anything important, just the weather, the neighbor's new dog, stuff like that. But it wasn't forced. It wasn't about fixing anything. We were just together. He paused, his face softening as he relived the moment. That walk made me realize something. I've been so focused on trying to fix our marriage, on trying to get us back to some ideal version of what we used to be, that I forgot what it feels like to just be with her. To enjoy her company without all the pressure and expectations. His voice grew quieter, more reflective. I think she felt it too. By the time we got home, she was smiling, not the polite, distant smile she usually gives me, but a real one. And later, when we were sitting on the couch, she reached out and took my hand. I can't even remember the last time she did that without me initiating it. He looked down, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. It's not a big thing, I know that. But it feels like a start. Like maybe she's finally starting to trust that this isn't just another phase I'm going through, that I really want to make things better, not by forcing her to change, but by showing her that we're in this together. I could see the relief in his posture, the faint glimmer of hope that had been absent for so long. Jake, what you're describing isn't small at all. It's significant. Rebuilding trust and connection doesn't happen all at once, it happens in moments like these, where both of you feel safe enough to let your guard down, even just a little. It's a process, and it sounds like you're both starting to take those first steps together. He nodded, his expression growing more thoughtful. I think I've been so caught up in the idea of fixing things that I forgot to pay attention to the little things that actually matter. Like the way she laughs when she's watching one of those ridiculous cooking shows, or how she always insists on folding the towels a certain way because it's the only right way. I used to notice those things, but somewhere along the line, I stopped. Maybe that's part of why we drifted apart. I stopped seeing her as a person and started seeing her as a role. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. I don't know where we're headed yet, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're moving in the same direction. And honestly, that's enough for now. The room was quiet for a moment as I let his words settle. There was a sense of clarity in him now, a recognition that progress doesn't always come in grand gestures or sweeping changes, but in small, meaningful moments of connection. If you've ever found yourself rediscovering the small, everyday things that make your relationship special, I'd love to hear about it. What helped you notice them again? Or, if you're still searching for that connection, what's been the hardest part for you? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, the simplest stories can inspire the biggest changes.